ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Star Wars Hot Toys 1/6 scale figure unboxing and review video. Now, today we're going to be taking a look, finally, at none other than the Mandalorian himself in his OG ragtag armor. This was a figure that, of course, we saw way back at New York Comic Con last year, and in fact, I saw it in person. I was blown away. I cannot wait to get this thing out of the box. Now, if you're wondering where I picked mine up from, I purchased it from toyswonderland.com. I used DHL to get it here incredibly fast. Unfortunately, the box took a few hits, but at the very least, the figure inside, fingers crossed, will be perfectly fine. So if you are looking to get your collectibles super quickly, consider picking them up with DHL. Also, while you are down in the description, why not hit that subscribe and bell notification icon so you're notified as soon as brand new Hot Toys third-party or sideshow content goes live on the channel. What we're going to do now, though, is get the box off the rotating turntable and do the unboxing. And here we have the box art for Mando himself. As you can see, a picture of the figure right up there front and center. And I have to say, this is a really beautiful but very simple piece of artwork, and I love it. Now, of course, down on the bottom, we do have that wraparound style piece. We did, of course, see that with the Remnant Trooper, and it is a pretty interesting design choice. Sometimes they do it, and sometimes they don't. But, of course, this time they have. Now, we have a picture of Mando with the Beskar shoulder pad, and, of course, on the other side, a picture of him with the OG shoulder pad. So you can kind of get a look at two different display options for your Mando figure. Now, of course, around the back, we do have all of the relevant legal information. Now, let's get this guy out here. As I said in the intro, super excited to open this guy up. I've already had the privilege of seeing him in person, and he looked fantastic. Fingers crossed, now that we're getting this guy, the Beskar 1, the Heavy Mando, and IG-11 aren't too far behind. Now, the insert here, really nicely done. Of course, it appears like the sort of doorway from episode 1, but then again, he's wearing the Beskar shoulder pad, so kind of not really, but nevertheless, a really nice artistic style image. And of course, here we have the Mando himself. Right up here front and center, a couple of accessories as well as his hands. Doesn't come with a hell of a lot of hands, but then again, I guess he doesn't really need them either. But Mando himself is housed there in his plastic prison, and I have to say, the outfit on this guy looks absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to take a much closer look at all of the detail throughout this entire thing, because it looks absolutely jam-packed with some awesome goodness in terms of the quality of the paint apps. Now, of course, we do have a few other bits and pieces housed in the box, so what we're going to do now is get all of this stuff laid out properly in the light box and take a closer look at everything he comes with. And here we have all of the accessories that come with Mando himself. Now, as you can see, it's a fairly decent assortment, at least in my opinion. Nowhere near the level of the deluxe Beskar version, mind you, but for me, this works perfectly fine. Now, let's take a look at the display base first. Right off the bat, this is a reused display base. We've gotten it a bunch of times before, even with such figures as the Sand Trooper, but I think it works really nicely. Kind of replicates that desert look from the poster where he's walking through the desert, maybe on Navarro, who knows. It's a slightly darker color than the one from the Sand Trooper, and it has some modifications back here for the pikes themselves, so it's not entirely reused. There are some subtle changes. Now, of course, around the front you can see the Mandalorian, a very nice metal nameplate, very classy. Thank you, Hot Toys, for going all out and giving us a metal nameplate this time. But yes, I'm perfectly fine with the reuse of this display base, because it works really nicely for Mando. Now, carrying on with our looks at the pieces for the display base, let's take a look at one of the pikes. As you can see underneath on this unpainted section, it is a copper style plastic, then painted up it is nice and matte black, whereas when you get to the top you can see the copper again, so it's a nice effect. Looks like a proper rusty piece of metal, and before you ask, no, it isn't metal, this is a plastic piece. No die cast on this figure whatsoever, but I'm perfectly fine with that. These are already pointy and sharp enough. You don't want to be shipping these spiky things around the world, especially not to Australia, because customs might stop it, so I'm perfectly fine with this being made out of plastic. Now, the only other real piece that goes on the display base is the Stormtrooper helmet. I have to say, this thing is stunning. For all of those out there who were taking a look at those early pictures, super overexposed, maybe even with a flash directly pointed at it, yes, it looked horrible, but tell me, in hand in this shot right here. Does it look anywhere near as bad as that one? I honestly don't think so personally, but let me know your personal comments in the comments down below. But the paintwork, super nice. It's subtle where it needs to be along the top here, and then heavy where it needs to be as well. It looks like a proper, soiled, dirtied, bloodied up Stormtrooper helmet. For those of you saying they rushed this particular accessory to get the figure out sooner, I honestly don't think it's the case. I think this looks better than the prototype one that we saw back in July of last year. The blood also looks really darn nice, and of course down the bottom here we do have a bit of a scarf thing hanging down. It'll complete the look quite nicely when it's on one of those spikes on the display base. Now, moving on to some of Mando's weaponry, because of course weapons are part of his religion. This is his Ambon Phase Pulse Blaster. I hope I said that correctly. I think I did. This is a really nice piece. It's nicely painted, nicely sculpted, detailed, and of course weathered, especially down here with the heat treatment on the barrel there. It looks beautiful. I'm really impressed with the work that Hot Toys have put in here, but that's not all. It is modular. You can remove this little scope so you can have him sort of peeking down it, and it is keyed, so you can see it only goes back in one way. Makes it a little bit tricky to do on camera, but trust me, it goes in there very nice and securely. And the other thing that you can do is move up this section, then use one of the cartridges on the outfit on one of the belts or around the shin to look like he's loading it. That is a really nice touch and something they didn't have to do at all. Now, the way you attach this to Mando is via this strap. It just plugs in, unfortunately. I kind of would have liked a really strong magnet, but I'm sure this is going to work perfectly fine as well. Just be careful not to break that little peg because it is exceptionally small, but overall this piece is really nicely done. I love that wood effect there on the back of the stock. Very nice piece. Now he does come with this electric style piece that you can use in conjunction with his big rifle there. It's rather nice. We've seen this sort of stuff before. I don't think I'm going to be using it with my Mando, but I'm sure people will be able to take some really badass pics with this piece right here. And the only other real weapon he does come with is his Blastech SE14C, I do believe this is called. It's a smaller pistol, but it is really nicely weathered, detailed, and of course sculpted. You can see this nice sort of weathering wash throughout the entire thing. It looks like a proper aged blaster made of metal, and it's beautiful. I love this particular piece right here. More than likely, I'm going to be displaying my Mando holding this badass pistol. And the only other real things he does come with is these swap out shoulder pads. So you get the Beskar one that's already on him out of the box, which you already saw. And of course this Shore Trooper style one with some really nice sort of metallic undertones there. It looks like the paint has been chipped off a metal plate, and that is beautiful. One of the best applications of weathering that I personally think I've ever seen by Hot Toys. It's stunning. And of course the way it attaches is with Velcro. Very straightforward. He also does come with a tracking fob. Very basic in its execution, but nicely done. It is on a more pliable style plastic, so you shouldn't have any worries tucking this into the belt. This piece isn't going to break off. Now, a couple of people were complaining as to why he only comes with one removable detonator. This is removed from the belt fresh out of the box. You can see some felt on the back there, but honestly, I'm perfectly fine. I don't think you're going to have your Mando holding more than one. Not that you really could unless you did it in both hands, but for me, one is perfectly serviceable. Now, speaking of hands, he does come with a fair few with the Shore Trooper style little pads on the back there. The entire thing is really nicely weathered all the way down to the sort of flecking around that plate there, and of course a subtle wash all over the entire thing. I love this pop of color on the Mando's outfit. It looks stunning, and it does in figure format as well. Now, what we're going to do next is get Mando himself out here and take a closer look. And here we have Mando himself standing straight up and down the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. And I have to say, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you will agree with me, hot damn, isn't this a good looking figure? He looks stunning. Pretty much everything about him looks ripped straight out of the show, which of course it should be. So darn accurate, so darn faithful, and so well executed. He pretty much looks good all the way around, including the cape. Not often does Hot Toys kill the capes, but they have done it here. The nice subtle drape, the tattered look, it ties the outfit together perfectly, but not just to focus on one thing about the figure. The overall look of the entire thing looks, as I said, pretty much perfect. I do have a couple of complaints, mainly to do with that big blaster, and there's a very good reason why it's not in this shot right here. We'll touch on that in just a second, but overall, I'm loving the way this guy looks. Now, what we're going to do next is take him off the rotating turntable, punch in, and take a closer look at the details. And here we have the OG Mando himself up close and personal, and I have to say, this guy looks fantastic. In fact, all of the detail throughout this entire thing, it's just breathtaking. There's no two ways about it. Now let's start off by taking a look at the helmet first. It has that traditional, iconic, now at least, Beskar look. It's chrome, it's shiny, but it's also got that sort of deep, dark, metallic look about it. The entire thing is also nicely weathered, but not to say that it's battle damaged, because of course Beskar is one of the strongest materials in all of Star Wars, so it doesn't actually get all that damaged, but it does get dirty. Now you can see there is a metal flake throughout the entire thing. Honestly, it looks beautiful. I love the way they've done the Beskar. Obviously, they did the same treatment to the shoulder pad, which you already saw in the unboxing segment, but I have to say, this thing looks beautiful. Now moving down to the armor itself, you can see there's a bit of a higgledy-piggledy look, but of course that's by design. That's the version of the character that we're looking at, and I love it. You can also see a subtle sort of silver hint right under that brown sort of look of the armor itself. It comes through so very nicely. It looks like proper chipped metal. They've honestly nailed the look of all of the weathering on the armor. You can tell it's not just a one single pass of paint. There's black, there's a little bit of yellow even, a little bit of a lighter brown, there's of course silver, and of course a gunmetal color. They've used so many different styles and colors of paint on this piece right here, just this single shoulder pad, to give it such an authentic look, and I love the way they've done it. And of course they've carried that throughout all of the armor pieces, the gauntlets, and the torso itself. But I have to say, it looks all together so very cohesive. It looks fantastic. Now this strap across the chest here, it looks pretty good as well, but it is of course pleather, and it's 2-ply at that. I have to tell you, my Justice League Wonder Woman also obviously has the strapping across the torso there. The two pieces of pleather connected between them, they split, which was a real pain having to glue them back together. Fingers crossed Mando doesn't have that issue. Just spoiler alert, this stitching isn't real stitching. It's just done on the one piece, done on the other piece, and then they're glued together. It's just made to look like it's stitched. I honestly don't know why they didn't stitch it, but nevertheless, it isn't fully stitched. It's a bit of a pain. You can also see this clip connection piece. It's a little bit ugly. That might be accurate to the show, I'm not entirely sure, but the piece for the rifle does just peg in there. And let's segue a little bit to the rifle. I had a bit of an issue with mine. This piece, and you'll hear me rant about it later I'm sure, broke off. This little peg right here broke off inside this piece. I have since glued it, but it's not really going to hold. Luckily, I've spoken to Toys Wonderland. They will be replacing it, and they will be paying for all of the shipping. So that's one of the good things about ordering from them, is their after-sale service is pretty darn good. If you have a broken thing on a figure, they will replace it for you, so definitely let them know. I will be getting this replaced. I don't know if it's going to be the rifle or send the entire figure back and they'll send me a new one. Whatever it is, I'm glad that it's going to get sorted, because that snapping off was a right pain. This should have been a magnet, but anyway, we'll leave that for the pros and cons segment. Now moving down to the belt itself, you can see there are more of those little canisters. They all can actually be removed, so if you do want to have him with more or less of them, you can move this one up to here and fill in that empty spot. You can do so, and of course use it to load the rifle. Now I do have one slight complaint with the detonator piece that slots into the belt. You can see, even though it's slotted in there, it's very clearly not like the rest. You can see a gap there. It's not ideal. I've tried pushing it sort of flat down, but I don't think that's by any means a deal breaker, at least for me personally. Hey, it might be for you, but for me, I can definitely live with that. Now, I quickly want to talk about the cape material, because it is stunning. It's super lightweight, it drapes very nicely. You can see it's made out of that same sort of textured fabric like we get with the Jedi robes, so if you have one of the Jedi figures, you already know what this feels like. It's super supple. It doesn't have a wire in it though. I did think, honestly, from the blogger photos, because they had the cape sort of billowing in the wind, there was going to be a wire down the edge, but there isn't. I'm a little bit bummed out, honestly, but not entirely so. It still looks pretty darn awesome. Panning the camera down to give you a closer look at the rest of the outfit. As you can see, the armor plates continue on throughout. They are nicely attached with Velcro, so they do move around quite freely, and you can, of course, take them off if that's something you'd like to do. And of course, the leg ones look beautiful as well. That weathering shines a treat. The subtle pop of silver when the light hits it just right brings the entire thing to life. It shows a bit of depth to the armor, which is of course what you need. If this was just all flat painted, it would be a little bit boring. Now the pants themselves are nicely done. Yes, they are baggy, but not overly so. I think they've done it to help articulation because they move quite freely, no hindrance at all in my personal experience. So I do believe they've done this sort of baggy look on purpose. It doesn't look all that inaccurate. I've looked at a few pictures just off camera here, and it looks fairly close to what we see in the show. So for me, the pants being a little bit more baggy, I can honestly live with it. Now moving down to the rest of the legs, you can see there is an asymmetrical look, obviously, throughout the entire suit, and I think that's what really draws the eye, how weird and wacky and sort of OG cowboy style it is. I love the way this entire thing comes together. Even though none of the pieces really do match, it looks fantastic. You can also see more of these canisters down here on the shin. These ones can also be removed. They are in there nice and tight though, which is good. They won't be falling out when you have him in some crazy dynamic poses. It also looks like he's borrowed this shin guard from either a shore trooper or stormtrooper and painted it up. It's nice to see a bit of sort of ragtag look for one of our hero style characters. Usually they're nice and pristine with their outfits, but no, this time we're getting a fully sort of kitted up and ragtag look for the Mando, and I love it. Now moving down to the feet themselves, nicely done, very nicely textured, a lot of weathering. They aren't overly weathered, but you can tell he's been around, and I think it looks really good. It comes across very nicely like a character who's been out in the world shooting people and also getting some bounties, but I do think they've done a very nice job. They've also killed it with the articulation because yes, it is a split cut boot design, so you do get pretty much the full articulation from a booted style character while still maintaining the look, which is really done awesome. I'm very glad that they decided to do a split cut design, especially for a character like Mando. You can have walking poses or you can have straight up action filled poses, and you can rest assured that his ankles can do it. Now for a quick side-by-side comparison, here we have Mando standing alongside my personal favorite version of Boba Fett, being the Empire Strikes Back version, and I have to say these two look very, very different. They are still both Mandalorian-inspired armors, more specifically talking about Boba here, but I do love that there are those similarities. Obviously, the shape of the chest plate, the overall look of the knee pads, and also the gauntlets, also the helmet design. But with that being said, Boba Fett's helmet is surprisingly a hell of a lot larger. Now looking at it, it kind of looks a little bit comical, like someone cosplaying as a Mando, but still out of context, just seeing him in the display, not standing alongside Mandalorian, which I definitely won't be doing because he definitely shows him up here, it'll be perfectly fine. Mando himself, though, I do think has had the benefit of time. They were able to spend a few more years, obviously, perfecting the look of a Mandalorian-style character, and that they've done. I personally do prefer nowadays the look of Mando's armor, even in this original format, over that of Boba Fett. Don't get me wrong, Boba Fett is still my favorite overall Star Wars character, and to this day I still love the way he looks, but especially in figure format, I think Mando looks even more classy than Boba Fett himself. Just going over articulation on Mando himself. Now bear in mind, this is my personal copy of the figure, so I'm going to be a little bit more careful. When you get yours in hand, if you want to push the joints maybe a little bit further than I'm willing to go, that's totally your prerogative. Now starting off with the helmet itself, it is on a traditional hot toy style joint, one ball joint at the lower part of the neck and then one ball joint at the top. You do get a fairly decent range of motion all the way around. I'm perfectly happy with how that moves. Now the arms themselves, because of the nature of these shoulder pads, they will be a little bit more hindered, but they are ratcheted, and that is a good thing because when you have him holding up accessories, you don't want them falling down over time, so I do appreciate it. Now you will have to move the outfit around to get even more range of motion, but pretty much you can get them going all the way forward if you do futz with the outfit, but it stops at about there naturally, and of course about there going outwards before there is starting to be a little bit of stress down there on the bottom part of the arms. You have a swivel at the upper bicep and also a butterfly joint up there in the shoulder. Now you do have a really nice and very forgiving double bend at the elbow and a traditional 1/6 scale joint at the wrist itself. Now for the torso, you will have a pretty restricted range of motion due to all of this stuff. You've got armor, you've got different little vests, and of course this strap that goes across the top top there, so you will have to be a little bit more careful, but you do get swivel, pivot, and of course a little bit of crunch forward and back. And the legs themselves are pretty much unrestricted. Due to the baggy nature of the pants that we mentioned earlier, you can get them moving pretty much all the way forward and out as well. In fact, out is quite a significant range. You do have a swivel at the upper thigh, a double bend at the knee, which is again ratcheted, and of course down at the feet we do have a split cut boot design. Look at that generous ankle pivot. Just going over the 3 cool and 3 annoying things for Mando. The first annoying thing is Velcro. Most of the armor pieces are attached by it, but I really don't know why. I do think they could have incorporated a nice magnetic plate there rather than going for Velcro. As you can see, the fuzzy section is getting a little bit torn up. I've only taken this off 2 times, but if you are doing it a bunch of times, I'm sure that it will get damaged, so do be careful. Don't switch it out too often, and I'm sure you'll be perfectly fine. The second annoying thing, and it is entirely fixable, but it's this holster. I have this issue. Ryan also had this issue when he was taking pics of his Mando, but the holster likes to spring outwards rather than sitting nice and flat down by his thigh there. You can of course wet this down a little bit and shape it, and when it dries it should stay in place, but then again, maybe it won't work. I haven't actually tried it myself. Fingers crossed I can get it to sit nice and flat, because as it stands sticking out like that, it looks a little bit goofy. The third annoying thing, and by no means in my opinion is this a deal breaker, but it's this stupid attachment method for this piece right here that holds the blaster on his back. I don't know why it has to be a peg. I'm incredibly worried to push this all the way in because it is so darn tight. Pulling that out might actually break that peg off. That, if anything, should have been made out of a magnetic piece. The first cool thing about Mando has to be his rifle with this effect on it. Honestly, when I looked at the accessories, I said I wasn't going to use this, but now popping it on there, it kind of brings the entire thing to life, and I love the way it looks. What I mean by that is the subtle blue sort of weathering along the top there really does make it blend into this effect quite nicely, and honestly, when the light hits it, it glows so darn well. The second cool thing has to be the weathering throughout the entire suit on Mando. This thing looks beautiful. In my opinion, the best weathering technique that Hot Toys have ever applied to any figure. This thing looks so lifelike. I am so impressed with the applications of the battle damage and wear and tear throughout this entire thing. The third cool thing has to be this display base. It's nasty, it's gnarly, and honestly, one of the most sort of risque things that Hot Toys have done for Star Wars in a while. I'm very impressed that they were able to do this and sell it, because this, not really something that Disney I'm sure would usually allow, but either way, I'm really impressed with how simple and well executed this diorama style display base really is. Just wrapping up on Mando himself. Now I have to say, I know I've been pretty positive throughout the course of this video, and that's kind of because I really don't have all that much to complain about with this figure right here. They've presented us with a pretty darn good release. I almost have no complaints, except for one very big one, and that's the big blaster. Why on earth did they make that tiny, stupid little peg that broke off instantly on camera? By the way, stay tuned to the end credits to see what I mean. I have filmed that piece breaking off as I was trying to remove the blaster from the body. But it shouldn't have happened. That should have been magnetic. There is a magnet in the back that the blaster does attach to, but unfortunately it's not strong enough to hold it up without that clip there, so there's already a lot of weight pulling back on the clip. So even without me removing it on camera, I still think it honestly would have broken. Design flaw? Absolutely. Fingers crossed that's something that a lot of you don't have to experience. Hopefully it's just mine and the plastic was a little bit weaker. Maybe they didn't pour it in the mold just right. I don't know. I'm just speculating at this point. But for whatever reason, it just doesn't work. They shouldn't have done that. It's a right pain and now it's broken. But honestly, and I know it's kind of sacrilege for me to say this, but it doesn't ruin my experience with the figure at all. He's still Mando, even without that big blaster on his back, and he's still a badass. I love the way he looks. Honestly, this might be, and I know it's kind of early to call it, but it might be my favorite Star Wars figure that I've ever owned. And I know, bit of a cop-out, new character, new release, of course I'm going to say that, but no, seriously, he has a presence. He's a badass, and he doesn't even have a head sculpt, but still, I think they've knocked it out of the park. The paint application, the sculpting, the fact that you can move him and articulate him the way he can because of some of the things that they've decided to do, the baggier pants, the removable armor plates here and there so that you can put him in a pose, then pop the plates back on there. That's a tip from Posing with Peter, by the way. They've killed it. I'm really impressed with this release. So absolutely, hands down, I recommend this Mando for any of you out there who are on the fence. Should I pick up this Mando, go for Beskar? My answer to that is why not both? I've seen people say, hey, I'm just going to wait for the Season 2 version. Honestly, you don't even know what that's going to look like. He might be wearing the same outfit, Hot Toys doesn't make one from that season, and you've missed out entirely. So get off the fence, pick up this Mando. He is honestly that good. I am not exaggerating. I love the way this piece looks. Now, if you are looking to pick him up, he is in stock right now from toyswonderland.com, and the link for that is, of course, down in the description below. As I said, the rifle on mine did break, but I'm using Toys Wonderland's after-sales service. They are replacing the rifle for me, sending me out an entirely new one, and paying for shipping both to and from me. That's a really nice level of service, and more info on that is on their website. Also, while you are down in the description, why not check out the link to 6 Scale Network, the awesome Facebook group. Come along, chat figures, share photos of your collection, and of course, see what's coming up next on the channel. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video. Later in the video, but let's get this thing out of here, because it's a little bit cumbersome to work with when we are looking at the figure himself.